So I just quit my job, and I guess I should probably figure out a way to make some money now. Okay, so let's rewind for a second. My story starts in 1990, Birmingham. Madonna's Vogue was #1 the day I was born, and tech was just about to explode into the mainstream. My tech obsession kind of started with video games. We couldn't afford a PC until I was about 13, but I loved playing games on my Super Nintendo, Sega Mega Drive, and PlayStation. I was finding ways to hack those systems, installing mods, and using things like Action Replay to bring in cheats into the games. The late 90s and early 2000s were tech mayhem. There were tech founders like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and these were like rock stars. Products were being released, and the future felt limitless. In fact, I distinctly remember the Xbox launch, where The Rock from WWE came out on stage just to announce this console. My obsession with computers, coupled with some early entrepreneurial spirit, led me down the road of building websites as a teenager for some extra cash. At one point, I was convinced I was going to be the next Bill Gates. And then, somewhere along the way, I just kinda lost that. I went to uni, got a good job, moved to London, worked my way up the corporate ladder, and spent 14 good years building a career and meeting some brilliant people. But that kid who wanted to build the next Microsoft was still in there. And every year that passed, that voice just got a little bit louder. So I'm now 35, and it felt like a now or never moment. Either I do this now, or it's never gonna happen. So what am I actually building? I'm building an AI consultancy with a co-founder and a bunch of products. But here's the thing, this series isn't about me pitching you on the business or selling you AI. This series is what it's actually like to be a co-founder. How I structure my day when there's no one telling me what to do, how I get over the financial stress, how we win work, and how we've put together the entire business. So the first thing I did was sit down and really think about what goals I wanted to achieve. What did I actually want to unlock by starting my own business that I couldn't do by working for someone else? Okay, no, if I get back to being serious again, this is what I came up with. So, #1, I want to retire at the age of 45. Quite ambitious, given that I'm currently 35. So this gives me 10 years to pay off all my debts, including my mortgage, ensure that I have enough money to live the rest of my life on, and be able to fully retire. #2, I actually wanted less stress. Now this may sound weird, but the previous role I was in was highly stressful, and a lot of that stress came from not being able to call the shots myself, not being able to change things, not being able to influence, or not being able to directly see outcome from what I was doing. #3, I wanted to break free from the 9 to 5 and location. And what I mean by this is I want to be able to work from anywhere, whether that be at home here in the UK or on holiday in Spain on the beach. #4, I wanted to be a better friend and better family member to those in my immediate family. So I'd spent a lot of time chasing the career ladder and putting a lot of my time and effort into work. And I found that meant that I'd neglected certain other things in my life, including spending time with friends and family that I love. So I wanted to be able to make more time for that. And finally, #5, the idea of being your own boss is quite attractive. That idea of not being able to answer to anyone, being able to have the freedom to do whatever you want, through the good and bad. So at this point in the video, I'd kind of run out of all advice that I wanted to bring in episode 1. So I thought it was worth bringing in some outside help and speaking to a friend and mentor, Neil Orbin, on what he's done throughout his career and what advice he would bring to someone who wanted to start a business today. this is how that conversation went. So, Neil, thanks for joining me for the first episode of this video series. I wanted to get someone who had lived through an experience of advising many companies, advising many startups, etc., and get your thoughts on the bits and pieces that people should be thinking about, what organizations that are starting up should be concerned about, what they should be focused on, and generally get your advice. But do you want to start with a bit of an intro?
I'm Neil. I'm currently semi-retired, but I've had a career in lots of different sort of IT and digital type companies that's gone on for about 39 years now. So, and yeah, and me and Steve know each other because we worked at Microsoft together for
And
a
you're a
number of
proud
years.
Welshman, which some viewers might know what that is.
I am proud. I live in Wales. I did live in England for about 10 years, but I mainly lived most of my life in Wales. I was born in Wales. I like Wales, but in some ways I'm not very good because I'm not a Welsh speaker. Wales has its own language, and I don't speak it to my shame. Wales is a very rural, very pretty part of the United Kingdom, and so I enjoy
I
exploring it
almost
and living in
King's
it.
Point is actually quite interesting, right? Particularly in the valleys. So, do you want to talk about some of your work that you do with the King's Trust and how you're mentoring startups and small businesses? And do you focus predominantly on Wales, or is that across the UK?
Yeah, so a little bit of context then. So about 10 years ago, I was working for Capgemini, and they had an internal sort of communication exercise about this charity called the King's Trust. It was called the Prince's Trust back then because it's linked to Prince Charles at that. It is the main focus of the charity is to help people to get into work and young people to get to work. That's its thing, and it does that through multiple programs and activities aimed at different types of young people, people who've got different experiences, maybe people with different places in their life. And so some of them, for example, are quite entrepreneurial. They want to actually develop their own business and they're very keen to do that. And they have the savviness and the ability to do those sorts of things. And what the trust does then is to support them, give them some funding, and also then aligns mentors, and those mentors are from the volunteering sort of area and sector. So that's where I got involved initially. But there are a number of other programs that it does, and it does lots of opportunities for people maybe not quite so fortunate and not at that end of the spectrum. And they're more to do with things like confidence and anxiety and getting used to working life. I get involved in some of those activities as well. So there's an entire spectrum of stuff, and it is Welsh focused. They split themselves into the nations of the UK. I predominantly work in and around the group in the office. It tends to be a little bit more focused on the south of the country where a lot of people live and add a lot of industry and whatever that way. But then they do have people who work in the north and the west as well. So yeah, there's a whole it's the whole of the country. But I have got involved in some programs which are national as well. I do skills training for them where we do different topics and they tend to be published to anyone who wants to consume them.
Nice. We'll
So
put a
yeah,
link
it's
down
good.
to the King's Trust in the description if anyone's never heard of it. But so you're mentoring, I guess, budding entrepreneurs. What's the one piece of advice that you are constantly giving over and over again?
So what happens is when you're in the mentoring program, you look after somebody for about 2 years. So it's quite a long relationship, and initially meeting with them every month. So as they start, then and I've done I estimated I've done about
Oh
40 of
wow!
these over the 10 years or so. It's quite typical for me to have between two and four young people that I look after. I've got four at the moment. It's a variety of young people. I've got a window cleaner, an art dealer, a yoga teacher, and a photographer. It's a really broad spectrum of things. But there are some themes, especially when they're first starting. One of the main themes is they do plan and they do think and they sort of try to, and the trust helps them to do that. Over optimism is a thing. People think that they're going to start and all these wonderful orders are going to flood in and they're going to be so busy and have this much money coming in and all those types of things. Of course, it takes time sometimes to establish that. The curve of business is often a bit flatter than maybe what their planning was. And that means they can sometimes get into problems of morale, and tenacity is kind of sometimes an issue because you've got to keep on trying and keep on trying, and of course some of them ultimately, it doesn't end in the way they want. Some of them absolutely fly, and I've had a number of them over the years that have become really big organizations, and then a number of them that just got to the point of saying, okay, I tried and it didn't go well. One of the things that I try to position myself is critical friend. So of course I'm a friend, of course I want them to succeed, but I'm also trying to be objective. I don't have the baggage of a friend or family. I'm not one of the parents of a child that's going to go into the X Factor telling them they're a wonderful singer when they get up on the stage and everyone thinks, oh my God, what's happening here? Optimism and over optimism and how that influences both their planning and the impact of that not coming
I
off
think
is quite a common
it's
thing.
interesting. One of the things I've noticed is there is a lot of media, social media, LinkedIn, etc., where I think it's a great thing that a lot more younger people are starting to become more entrepreneurial minded and they want to run their own businesses. But you only ever see the positive things. I follow Y Combinator on LinkedIn, which is a thing that they do out in America for tech startups. And you see these, 18 to 20-year-old guys and girls that have just walked out with tens of millions of valuations of seed investment and funding from venture capitalists. You kind of look at it and think, well, that must be easy, right? There's loads of people doing that. Why don't I get on that bandwagon? So yeah, I think it's an important lesson that it's not always that successful. What is your most successful mentorship to date, if you can talk about that?
I don't think they'd mind me talking about it, but probably one of the biggest ones is the Y Valley Brewery. These are a pair of brothers who make mead based beers. So this is honey based beers, very traditional sort of things. And they've gone to the point where they are very big. They sell their beer through numerous channels as well as digital. They've also picked up work via distributing and having a channel, which is Marks and Spencers. So they're at that sort of level of success, and they are both brilliant. But that's one of many. There is numerous different people who've actually done very, very well. And it's down to them. It's not down to me or anyone else. So I'm almost trying to help them avoid the bear traps, really, rather than the skills and entrepreneurism and their attitude. And good for them. They've managed to do this quite well. One of the themes that I try to give to people, as well as the over optimism, is the topic of luck in business, in life. There are so many things that are determined which are just down to luck, just to the right people, right time, right place. Whether it's relationships all the way through to job interviews, whether it's it's making choices at certain times, pivotal moments in your life. And there have got to be so many stars that are aligned sometimes for that to actually work out. And therefore, it helps then to make sure people don't get too disappointed if things don't work out. But one of the key points is you can increase your luck. You can do things to make that luck better. And partly that's about planning and preparation and doing stuff proactively rather than just sitting there and thinking the world's going to come and give you a load of stuff. There are definitely things you can do to enhance your luck, but there's still a big dollop of luck that comes into some of these things, and being in the right
So you're
place at the right
also
time.
on the board for quite a major local tech company, shall we say? So you're doing advisory there, right? Do you find that you're talking about the same themes? I'm quite interested as to whether those topics are the same, whether you're talking to a budding entrepreneur through the King's Trust or whether you're advising a quite successful organisation, or do those themes kind of switch?
There is overlaps. There's definitely overlaps, and ultimately, what happens, I suppose, after all those decades of work, I've picked up experience. Sometimes that experience is not good experience. I've been through difficult problems and projects and things that have not worked, and things which have worked. The color and the texture of all of these things it means that you've got experience, and sometimes then it's quite nice to be able to talk about those experiences. It doesn't mean I'm particularly clever. I've lived through things, and I can talk about how they've gone on. So that's very similar to some of the young people on the trust, or whether it's actually to do with the companies that I'm involved in. A lot of it will be around, as it says, advising. It's different to leading. So ultimately there is things which you advise, and then for lots of other reasons and whatever is not picked up. It does mean that what people are taking advantage of is a lifetime, a career of working in multiple organizations and different ways of doing things. Even simple topics like how do different companies recruit people, or how do they performance manage people, or how do you incentivize people, or lots and lots of topics which I've lived through rather than me saying I've designed them or created them myself. So I'm able to talk about my experience of living through some of those items, which then helps and gives people a sort of a leg up and an insight into the possible sort of goods and bads of going down one
Yeah,
particular
so you
route.
talk, one of the things I was genuinely curious about when I thought about having this conversation with you is you've done some great stuff over quite a long career, and you're advising startups and SMEs and larger companies. But I don't think you've ever done it yourself, have you? I mean, have you done it yourself? And if not, why have you chosen to, I guess, not take on that challenge?
Yeah, it's a good point. So the last 3 years since I finished with Microsoft, I have my own company, but that's really just a vehicle to handle contracting. It's not really entrepreneurial in that way. I always had permanent roles in different companies. And I guess over time, then probably there's an element of me not being brave enough to actually go off and do other things. And sometimes the flexibility side of things and some of the niceness of having a permanent role rather than running your own business or whatever. So I did flirt at one point. I did actually start doing things such as photography, and I was getting involved in that and actually trying to think about a career in that, but I didn't come off. But the I think what I suppose there's an element of I live with somebody who and my partner, she's always been a contractor, always had her own company and always so I've seen very close the sort of ups and downs of some of that. And the ups being the compensation and the sort of, the interest and the dynamicness of actually being in and around that, not having to sort of have so many company politics or whatever else. But then there's times when then, I've seen that a contract comes to an end and you've got to actually go and do what you need to do and or travel a lot, or being away from home or having to go in more into things like the London environment and whatever else. So there's lots of ups and downs and sort of opportunity and interest and things actually made me not go into some of those items. But I suppose the experience, a lot of things about mentoring is actually just life experience. It's just actually about, when you're 20, 21 and you're trying to start a business and versus as I am in my 50s, and I've been through a number of experiences, whether they are with a corporate or personally or through other sort of scenarios, then it's just being able to give that little steer that think about this, think about that. This is what might happen, these types of those. It's just nudging people. It's not really saying do this. And that's what mentoring and
I have
coaching is
found
all about
myself
for me.
interested. The first step is definitely the scariest. I find myself asking, why haven't I done this sooner? And I think that the longer you go on in life, there's more and more things that you almost convince yourself are cons if you were to start your own thing. You've now got a mortgage to pay, or you've got kids and need to think about childcare and how that sort of thing is going to work. But yeah, there's always going to be something, I guess.
Yeah. And some of those things we can swipe away and say, oh, that's daft, just little practicalities. But for example, if you are a contractor, or if you have a situation where you need to be away a number of days a week and you have kids, that's a real practical, what the hell are we going to do about that kind of thing. So there's good reason. I don't look higher or lower on people at either end of that spectrum. It's circumstances
Yeah,
which are very personal to people. But yeah, the first step is can be a tricky one, and you need to not only have your plan A, but you need to have that plan B
see,
as well.
indeed.
If that doesn't work out, then what will I do? That's a good bit of thinking to do sometimes, just having that backup plan. It can give you confidence that doing plan A is okay because plan B is also completely viable. There's nothing wrong with that, and and it gives you confidence then to actually
Yeah.
try
Do you ever
plan A.
look back on your time and not with regret, but kind of think, what if? I'm 35. For me, even at this age, this felt like a pivotal now or never moment. I either do this now or I'm going to get stuck in the comfort And I say that like it's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm going to get stuck in the comfort of a secure, stable job, have a family, have bills to pay, etc. And I'm just never going to get around to it. Do you ever look back on your time and think, oh, what if I did that differently, or if I maybe started something 20 years ago? I guess hindsight's a
I
useful
mean,
thing, yeah.
could have, yeah, yeah. It's one of those, hindsight's in 2020 vision is sort of saying, isn't it? But I mean, there are moments of truth at different times that I could have made a very different decision, or I could have not made a decision, as in I could have carried on doing what I was doing previously. And you do sort of think about the what ifs. There was an opportunity. I was able to, within a company, move out to a different country, and I didn't take that opportunity. And you do think, oh, that would have been totally life changing. That would have been completely culturally, societal, family, everything would have actually massively changed. And so there's moments like that. There are conscious things that I did do, especially in the early side of my career, which I think did ultimately help me. Someone clever once sort of said, plan on, for example, only ever being with a company for 2 to 3 years and then change. That was an interesting piece of advice I had, and it obviously did hit me, and I did do that. And the times when I didn't do that was because actually I had a fundamental change within a company. I'd actually go to a completely different role or do different things. So yeah, there were times when I was quite comfortable within a company, but I had the little ticking clock going, right, okay, we're at 3 years now, so now's the time to change. And it meant that the number of companies that I work for, but also things like compensation stepped rather than just gradual. I had very different roles, and so that kept me. But there's things which you can do which are quite radical, even within that concept of working for a company rather than
I think
being an
that's
entrepreneur.
probably one of my biggest regrets. Actually, I've only worked at two companies. Even if you don't switch, just by looking at what's out there in the market, you get a feel of right, what's the average that people are being paid, what's the average responsibilities of someone with my kind of level of seniority, what are other people doing in similar roles at other organisations. I spent a long time just not doing that, getting quite blinkered into just being very good at the job that I was doing at the company that I was doing, which was great, but there's obviously a whole world out there. We live in a global society now. There's overseas opportunities as well. And even just from a networking perspective, it's great to understand what other people in your profession are doing, right?
Yeah, and I think there's people out there that I know, and that have been in the same sort of company, same sort of role almost for decades, and they're perfectly happy. There's an element of work to live, live to work, which is your, attitude towards some of these things. They just suits people. But I kind of realized I was quite ambitious in the earlys and middle of my career, looking for that next opportunity quite a lot. And again, interestingly, that then changed, as you get a bit older and your ambition is more then about things that you're going to do after work rather than actually to do then with the career and the work itself. Yeah, I suppose that's the other thing. Things change and people change, attitudes change, their desires change over time, and that's
So
fine.
I've set a goal of retiring by the age of 45. I'm 35 now, so that gives me 10 years to pay off debts, save up enough money to be able to live a somewhat comfortable life. You're probably the only person I know who has managed to achieve that. Not quite at 45, but you did retire early. You made sure you had enough money to be comfortable. One of the things I'm not sure I agree with, but I do hear quite often is, well, what am I going to do? Well, if I retire early, I'm going to get bored, this, that, and the other. So, have you found yourself creeping back into working life, or have you managed to find enough things to be able to occupy your time? And just generally, how are you finding retirement?
So, I mean, I started this thinking and planning around 2015. The reason being is as the pension reform came in. So it meant that you could access monies in different ways than what previously you were able to do. A lot of people maybe not even recognize this time before then, but it was a much more restrictive situation. And I started to plan and started to get into that mindset. I worked backwards. So what I was thinking was, well, if what is the point at the moment in time? So rather than thinking of an age, I was thinking of a this is a portfolio, a lump of things that will allow me to be comfortable and press a button at a certain time. That's one way I would suggest you and others think about it, is not just a target age, but actually a target position. I'm now in a position where I can have houses, mortgages, and whatever I need to spend money on, but not having to do it. The other one is it doesn't have to be so dramatic as, right, I'm going to get to a certain age and go bang and everything turns off. It can be you move to part time, and that's a very common sort of scenario, or you just change types of roles. People use the opportunity to go into something they're passionate about but doesn't need as much time. For that period of about 7 years, I was on the case thinking about it and working it out in detail.
So your
Then,
it was more, I need to have paid off this mortgage, I need to have done these things, as opposed to I'm
yeah,
aiming for this point in time.
yeah. And I think what you're then doing is setting yourself up for a possible fail, right? If you're saying to yourself, I've got to do it by 45, and then you go, oh, I'm 45 and I haven't got enough money or I haven't got enough this, then you can think, oh, it's a failure. It's black and white. I think what mine is that you determine the sort of characteristics of what you actually want to move to, and then say, right, have I met those objectives? Have I paid off the mortgage? Have I got enough money sitting in investments or pensions or got whatever mechanics you got sitting around that actually allowed me to have money to be able to buy the shopping every month, all that type of stuff. And it's a bit detailed and nerdy, but it's actually quite a nice thing to do. And there are lots of other models you can use, which are more top down, but I decided to go
How
bottom
did
up.
you how did you avoid getting to a point and going, oh well, if I don't retire now and I work another 2 3 years, then I can maybe afford a bigger house, or I could do this, or I could get a holiday home. Before you know it, you've started layering on, I think, a load of things into that retirement state of mind. So how did you avoid going down that road?
Yeah, it's a good point because I remember the time when I did it, then there was a lot of people who were very skeptical, saying, "What are you doing? Why you're in a really good place? You're working for Microsoft. We were in a lucrative period in relation to certain things happening. Why on earth would I press a button and stop it?" One of the things you get back to is rather than just saying, I'm going to do something at a particular time, there's an element of what am I actually going to do? So, what is the driver? What is the thing that's actually saying? The why for me was, I had a very busy career, regularly being away from home, working long hours. And my target was to have some time to do things that I wanted to do, not what someone else wanted me to do. That was the driver for me. It meant that I was thinking a lot about what would you do if you did have that opportunity? What was the sort of things that I would get up to? And I started creating lists and trying to work stuff out in my own head of the types of stuff that I'd like to do, whether it's hobbies or skills or education or volunteering or just fun things for me, and whatever else. And there was a pivotal TED talk that I watched from a guy called Dr. Riley. Maybe we can share the link, which talked about the phases of retirement. And that was very important to me, thinking about understanding what other people have been through, but also then planning ahead a little bit. So that was quite an important moment for me to think about stuff. That planning and thinking has come to fruition. There's an old joke about you're going to be retiring and all you're going to do is watch daytime TV and drink lager at lunchtime type stuff. And I was never going to be that. I don't think I was ever going to be bored. But what's interesting is that the things you think you would like to do and the stuff that you think, oh, I'm going to play golf all day or whatever your pastime is. Well, you wake up some mornings and you're not in the mood. There's other things, it's just you've got to, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on, but the luxury of having the choice and not having to, be somewhere or do something that maybe you really didn't want to do, that was very, very attractive to me. And that was what was really driving me about wanting to do it as soon as possible rather than actually doing the whole, if I work an extra bit or do an extra thing. Now that I've done it, I am absolutely clear, no matter what the job is, what the opportunity would be. Maybe never say never, but I'm pretty damn sure there is no way that I would ever go back into full-time work now. It's a different quality of life and a different time. The interesting thing is just having time for you.
Amazing. Can't wait. 10 years. I won't put a time on it like that. It's interesting you say it kind of ties back to the whole point of why I'm doing this series. The idea of, I guess, not needing to answer to someone else, being able to be on your own terms and work out, do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? I think was one of the key reasons why I've started doing this, and I'm now doing what I'm doing. There are pros and cons, but you do get a bit of that freedom of maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe I'm more interested in this kind of thing, so I'm going to go and pursue that, as opposed to being told that these are what the company priorities are, or whatever that your employer is telling you. We've been speaking for quite a while, actually. It's flown by. But I think the one thing I wanted to leave us on is, if you could go back and speak to your 20-year-old self, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to yourself?
But one of the things that interests me is I never really thought about the future when I was younger. You're in the moment, you're earning money, you've got bills, you've got things you're trying to do, you've got kids, you've got family, you've got all that type of stuff. It's quite a difficult thing to think, I'm going to stick something away for a possible moment in 20 or 30 years' time that will actually bring me some freedom and all those other things we talked about. It actually happened kind of out of my control, though, because a lot of companies will force you, in a good way, to be in a pension or to actually do things, or share scales, ways of investing and ways of doing things. And I must admit, I spent a lot of time trying to avoid those, trying to not put money into things and trying to look at the very short term versus the long term. So the obvious point being, I did it at 52. I probably could have done it many years younger if I'd paid more attention to some of those topics, notwithstanding they're hard choices, because, as I say, you have that formative years of your 20s and 30s when there's a lot of things coming at you. You're trying to buy houses, look after things, build yourself and have a life. Someone coming along and saying, why don't you stick a couple of £100 into a savings account every month, or do something more in your pension? That's a tough call, but that's probably the thing that is important but not urgent. And that's the problem, is that it creeps up on you. The sooner you start, the more you make, and compound interest and all those other good things kick in. So yeah, that would be the thing I would probably say, is pay more attention.
I was exactly the same, but it is a weird concept. I mean, if you're in your mid-20s, you think, well, I haven't even got a deposit to buy a place yet. I need that money in my bank account, not going into this mythical pot that I can't even withdraw legally until I'm at an age that I can't even see right now. And there is a bit of I guess this is a bit morbid, but am I even going to make it to that age? Why am I putting money away for something that I can't see when I can use that today and now? I should probably go and check how much I've got in my pension. I have no idea.
Well, that is one of the interesting things. What I started to do is to look around at what I had and understand, which comes back to that thing about not just picking a date, but actually picking a position. And if you, and there's lots of guidance and the podcasts and blogs all about that type of how to plan ahead and ways you can do it and what's the right number and all that type of stuff. But ultimately, if you don't even know what the number is, then how do you know what you're aiming for? It doesn't really matter what age you are, because you could get yourself into a position where you say, I'm going to do it, and then realize I haven't got enough money to look after yourself for the period of time. Even when you're not working, or if you've got the house paid off, there's always money you've got to pay. There's always bills, there's always something, and it's important to get yourself sorted out for that.
That they're going to pay for you when you retire.
Yeah, I've asked them about that. Didn't get a great response. The idea of my kids paying for me to roam around on my motorbikes at the moment is not something they're particularly interested in.
Well, thanks, Neil. Massively appreciated. If people have got questions for you, they can stick it in the comments, and you'll be having a look at this once it goes up, I'm sure. Any final words, call to action, that kind of thing you want to draw out?
I think it's interesting they're focusing on it and actually thinking ahead. I talked about luck and increasing your luck. One of the ways you can increase your luck is by thinking and planning and being proactive on these things. Talking about this sort of stuff is a good thing. It's increasing your luck and your chances of being able to do it. So, yeah. Okay,
if you made it this far in the video, then genuinely thank you for watching. It means a lot. So a lot of people are asking me how they can support. I'm going to do standard YouTube thing of asking you to like and subscribe. So there's plenty more content coming, covering topics like how we're breaking free from the 9 to 5, how we're choosing between product business or services business, how contracting works, and a whole lot of other topics relevant to SMEs and small businesses. So YouTube only starts the monetization process when a certain amount of subscribers are achieved. So I'm relying on you to help me get to that threshold. The next episode will be on Birmingham, my origin story, where I have 2 special guests joining me. So like and subscribe to get a notification when that goes live. Until then, thank you and see you on the next one.